Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory, evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue is underway once a week with Dr. Larry Arnn or one of his colleagues at Hillsdale College. We sit down and talk about a book or an event or a person or a thing that matters. And these weeks we are talking about this book, The Gathering Storm, which is the first of these 6 books, which is Winston Churchill's History of World War II. It will be available in the Hillsdale.edu bookstore. I think they always make whatever we're talking about available so you can get it there easily. It's online. It's so reproduced. It's all over the place. Chapter 2 of the volume is called Peace at its Zenith, 1922 to 1931, before Hitler begins to rise on the scene, which is in 1933. If we can briefly go back, Dr. Arnn, to Stanley Baldwin, because I did a lot of digging into him, and I want to ask you a question at the end of this. He was born in 1867. He died in 1947. He was in Parliament from 1908 to 1937, 25-year career. He went to Harrow, as did Churchill. He went to Trinity College, and he was, what did Churchill say about him? He was a new force. A new leader arose in Britain. He had been unknown or unnoticed in the world drama and played a modest part in domestic affairs. How do you account for someone like Baldwin rising to run Great Britain basically from 1922 to 1937 for 15 years with Ramsay MacDonald mixed in there in a hung parliament? How does such a mediocrity get so much power?
Well, he wasn't a mediocrity. He was good at a kind of thing, right? He was, if you're herding cats for a living, like, we said last time, 2 times ago, is he like Mitch McConnell or Bob Dole? Those guys are not known for fiery oratory or doing dramatic things. Most of their life is conversations with other powerful people, arranging offices and distributing advantages and disadvantages. He's a cat herder, I think, but he's very good, and he was a good man. He did adore Winston Churchill. He really did, and Churchill liked him, although he couldn't believe it. The thing that he says of Baldwin was a kindly man. Baldwin wanted the people, he wanted social reform. Churchill was big on that. People should get a chance to make a living, and if they have a disaster, they should have insurance, and all of those things are, good things in my opinion. And Churchill and Baldwin's right, and they saw eye to eye on that stuff, and they got on. And Churchill was.
Ramsay MacDonald is a socialist leader. And Lloyd George is gone from the scene, and Ramsay MacDonald becomes a socialist leader. And over here is Stanley Baldwin. And about Ramsay MacDonald, Churchill writes, he nursed many of the sentiments of the old Tory. Stanley Baldwin, apart from a manufacturer's ingrained approval of protection, was by disposition a truer representative of mild socialism than many to be found in the labor ranks. And so mild socialism is it's kind of a damning phrase. It's not unlike being called a rhino, I suppose. But the funniest line in the second chapter is Lloyd George was breaking up the government in 1922. At a crucial moment, I was prostrated by a severe operation for appendicitis, writes Churchill. And in the morning when I recovered consciousness, I learned that the Lloyd George government had resigned and that I had lost not only my appendix, but my office as Secretary of State for Dominions and Colonies, in which I conceived myself to have had some parliamentary and administrative success. This is what sets this book apart, an example of there is a lot of humor and personality in a history of this awful, savage war, which no other historian is allowed, I think. You think maybe William Manchester in Goodbye Darkness, but most history books that I read keep the personal out of it, Dr. Arnn. Does that make these special?
Well, Churchill's witty, he's and charming. And yeah, so Like Ramsay MacDonald, see, he didn't put it in this book, but he one time, in the time when basically Stanley Baldwin and the Tories were sustaining Ramsay MacDonald in office as prime minister, which means they were really controlling things, but they had this coalition government. Churchill says that when I was a boy, we would go to the circus and we would see amazing things. But there was one thing that was so horrible that my father would never look my eye upon it. I've waited now until my maturity to see, sitting across from me on the Treasury bench, the boneless wonder. So he could really cut him up too, right? Yeah. And you got to know that Baldwin not only tried repeatedly to get Churchill's seat taken away from him, expelled from Parliament, he put pressure on publications not to publish Churchill's articles. So he tried to deprive him of his livelihood. And I personally, my wife and I, own some letters that Winston Churchill wrote to a little old lady in Epping, his constituency, named Gladys Salmon, because she would go around to the constituency associations in the little towns north of London and talk them out of deselecting Winston Churchill. And so it was, these were hard politics and hard things were said, but on both sides. But Churchill, there's a very good, Neville Chamberlain was sometimes guilty of thinking that Churchill was just a lot of words. Stanley Baldwin regarded Churchill as very formidable, and he treated him seriously.
He wanted him out.
Oh, yeah, he wanted him out. And he was always trying to finesse so he didn't have to stand up and go toe-to-toe his policy against Winston Churchill. Because the thing to know about these 1930s, these years that the locust has eaten, Churchill with about 5 others in a parliament of 615, with the opposition party also united against him. He basically won that argument, and he compelled them to abandon disarmament and start rearmament.
That will be next week. Yeah. I want to add one paragraph. Yeah. I was politically severed from Mr. Baldwin about India. I was neither surprised nor unhappy when I was left out of the government that Baldwin formed. I had had 15 years of cabinet office and was now busy with my life of Marlborough. I can truthfully affirm that I never had resentment, still less pain, at being so decisively discarded in a moment of national stress. And on page 34, Mr. MacDonald reigned in increasing decrepitude at the summit of the British system for nearly 4 fateful years, and very soon in those 4 years came Hitler. Do you believe he never had a moment of resentment or pain as a result of being excluded after having been at the summit for 15 years?
Well, I'll give 2 answers to that. One is Churchill. They said of Churchill, even his enemies, he wouldn't tell a dinner lie. He was an amazingly truthful man. And also, no, I don't believe that.
Neither do I. I don't believe anyone who is used and thinks he has the capacity to forestall a cataclysm. And as you said, and we have a minute to the break, and maybe someone didn't hear the first 2 hours, and they'll go back and find it. He knew what war would mean, right? From the moment of the charge in the River War, from his time in the trenches in World War I between ministry offices, he knew what World War II would mean better than anyone.
That's right. And what was he thinking? First of all, it's always impossible to know what anyone's thinking. You can know what they said and wrote. So I'll make a speculation, though, because I don't know what he was thinking when he wrote that, or when that government formed that he was left out of. But he had experience being in a government where, to remain in the government, he could not speak out. And being out liberated him to make his speech.
And he used it. We will talk about that next week and the week after. Don't go anywhere, America. Dr. Arnn and I will be right back to talk about Coolidge and Hitler. No, they have nothing in common, but they are both part of events in the 1920s and 30s that lead to 1939.
This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. He is president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. This is a series of programs we're doing on Winston Churchill's 6-volume history of the World War II, in which he became the greatest man of the century, perhaps of the millennium, because he saved the West, and he did so nearly single-handedly by rallying Britain after the fall of France, before America entered the war and before Hitler invaded Russia. So he was genuinely alone in the parliament in the 30s opposing Hitler, and alone leading Britain against the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe and Hitler. But running up to that, we have barely said a word about America, Dr. Arnn. And there's really only one reference, one concrete reference in the first 3 chapters of The Gathering Storm. It's about Coolidge and the German war debt, and the debt that the German reparations. They owe people money for all the people they killed and the property they destroyed. And Britain owes the United States money for all the loans that Britain took out to fight the war. And they go to Coolidge, and Baldwin goes to Coolidge. They're looking for relief. And Coolidge says, quote, "They hired the money, didn't they?" And so he made Britain repay, and so Britain made Germany repay. And the first result, Churchill writes on page 23, the first result was everyone put the screw on Germany. What do you think? In retrospect, 2020 vision, no one went the Lincoln way. No one went the second inaugural. No one went towards forgiveness of debt and trying to put aside old wounds. Big mistake by everyone, obviously, but is it avoidable?
Well, I don't know. One of the points that Churchill makes in the last volume of The World Crisis is all of the European leaders that Woodrow Wilson went over there to lecture were fresh from elections, and the overwhelming issue and demand from the peoples of France and Italy and England was, in England the expression was, squeeze Germany till the pips squeak, because they lost loved ones and they suffered, right? And so overwhelming, they were going to make them pay. And Churchill actually stood up against that, at some political cost. He wanted a more generous peace. But, when you get a huge democratic population geared up for war against the bad guys, they might just try to extract something. And that's what happened. And I even think that in the context of the times, that was inevitable. And that's one reason why the Marshall Plan, and see, I want to enter something. First of all, I don't much blame Calvin Coolidge for that at all. I could imagine Donald Trump, what's Donald Trump doing about Ukraine? He's over there making a deal now. Putin won't play ball, so he's going to send him some weapons, and he's going to try to get the Europeans to pay for it. Good for him. I hope he does. And because they ought to, right? They're nearest, right? And so Churchill, by the way, after the Second World War, Britain is broke, as Churchill predicted they would be. Yep. And they need us, right? And we got something for that. Churchill is not, he doesn't go over there saying, he does say in speeches, we all have the same principles. In those same speeches, he always points out how we all have the same interest. And I'm not asking him to do anything that violates your interest. And, his case about us not collecting everything was they fought the war from 1914 till 1918, and we fought it from 1917 and 1918 and lost less. But at some point, we decided it was vital for us to be in it, precisely because we were attacked, by the way. And And so we joined up, and now it's a common cause, and they bore more of the burden. That was Churchill's argument, and there's something to that argument. And now I can just, I don't.
To get us back on track, I want to get to the European situation. 1921 with Washington, everyone agrees to disarm and sink their navies. The United States insists that Great Britain sever its treaty with Japan, which was not a great act of statesmanship because it turned Japan loose on the world to build their navy. But then 4 years later, they have the Locarno treaties that said Germany's going to be disarmed. Great Britain pledges to come to the aid of either France or Germany, whichever one is attacked by the other unfairly, without provocation. Churchill notes, the histories may be searched in vain for a parallel to such an undertaking. So Germany is disarmed, but intact. You pointed out in an earlier show, they begin to sort of rearm in the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, they're governed by something called the Weimar Republic, based on the German state, lasted from 1919 to 1933. It's a weak democracy. It is full of a lot of chaos politically. Hitler tries a push with his brown shirts in the 20s, and he's put in jail where he writes Mein Kampf, and he's blaming the Jews and he's blaming the communists for all this stuff. But Germany's worn out, and they rally around von Hindenburg, about whom Churchill says a few things, that he's a nice old gentleman, and better a zero than a Nero, someone says about him. I really don't get much of a sense for Germany from 1919 to 1933 other than hyperinflation and cabaret. That's my sense of Germany. What else do we need to know? Hyperinflation, which wiped out the middle class, by the way. That is important. Hyperinflation wiped out the middle class and radicalized the middle class so that they were open to Hitler. But it's got nothing to do with us. They just printed the money to pay the debts that we insisted they pay.
That's right. So it's got something to do with this, but because how are they going to do it, right? But remember, Germany was born because, like it or not, it was brilliantly led by Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm I. It was not brilliantly led after that, not before and into the First World War. In the First World War, they began to antagonize people, France and Russia, which had reason to be antagonized by them. And I mean, already, right? And Bismarck didn't do that. And then they began to antagonize Britain by building a navy and to rival the British Navy. And the thing is, Germany's got a much, much bigger army than Germany. And so if they've got an ocean-going navy capable of challenging the British Navy, then Britain's got to be worried, right? So a long string of alienating. Then they fight the war. They fought it well, but then after that, it's collapse. And they build a government out of nothing much connected to German history or customary practice. And it was a weak government. And these radicals, I mean, goodness, there was the army of the brown shirts under a man named Erich Röhm. That's 20,000 people marching and drilling and working violence in the streets around elections. And the communists have armies like that too. That's what Germany.
And Italy had the same thing, the black shirts. All, again, Churchill is in the wilderness. For the Churchill revisionists out there, it's got nothing to do with Churchill. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Now, I want to do a technical segment here. It's only 6 minutes. In Chapter 3, which is entitled Lurking Dangers, There is, as there is at the beginning of every chapter in the 6 volumes, a series of staccato notes. My reflections in 1928, annihilating terrors of future war, some technical predictions, Allied hatred of war and militarism. You can read them if you get the book. The German Navy, no major war for 10 years rule. This is a technique, Dr. Arnn. No one else I've ever read uses this technique. Why does Churchill use this technique of basically capitalizing what he's going to cover in the chapter ahead?
Well, Churchill figured out when he was young that the first step toward eloquence is clarity. And so Churchill writes to explain. He writes to make things clear. And that's one reason why it's attractive to listen to him. He's interesting because he tells you a story and you can follow it. If you just look at those head notes, which he loved, and in the World Crisis, by the way, in the early editions, I think the later ones too, there are notes in the margin announcing when a new theme begins, because he wants you to be able to follow it. And it shouldn't be hard to follow. Philosophers may write that so that some people understand some things and some people understand others, secret writing, esoteric writing. But Churchill is trying to explain. And don't be deceived. There are artfulnesses in this book that, it's just a fact that Churchill was a master rhetorician. And it's a fact that he's trying to persuade us of things here. And so and one of the ways to do that is to tell the story clearly. And also, as you quoted him to say at the beginning of all this, as he understands it, his story. What was he thinking at each stage? Now, I believe that he did. And see, the way you find out if any particular assertion is true in this, and, there are pages and pages of assertions, is go look them up. There's lots of sources, tracing always back to original sources that were written at the time. And so come to find out with Churchill, you can do that because the documents are published. And lots of people write about Churchill. But the truth is this, and so I submit that this is the story as he understood it. And I submit that if you go read his speeches in the 1930s and read his letters and articles in the 1930s, you will see that the story unfolded in his mind at the time very much as he tells it later.
I also note at the beginning of chapter 3, this is in point of fact of what you just said. He said, in my book, The Aftermath, which I have not read, I have set down some reflections on the 4 years which elapsed between the armistice and the change of government in Britain at the end of 1922. Writing in 1928, I was deeply under the impression of a future catastrophe. So we can look it up. He actually was under a deep impression. You've cited his works about that. His second sentence is, it was not until the dawn of the 20th century of the Christian era that war began to enter into its kingdom as the potential destroyer of the human race. So he's fought wars. He fought wars in Cuba, in India, in Africa, and in South Africa, and in World War I. So he's fought in 5 wars. He knows what war can do, and he is very aware of what is coming. And that's why perhaps his merry gang of 5, were they beneath the gangplank?
Gangway. They were backbenchers. Yeah, that's what that. Beneath the gangway just means Churchill, because he was old and important, seized a seat just below the gangway. If you go in the House of Commons on the left, the government on the right, the opposition, the benches are arranged going up, in long rows, parallel to the size of the aisle down the middle. And there are aisleways to go up the stairs to get to a backbench. And those aisleways are called gangways. And the first gangway is immediately after the Treasury bench, where the Prime Minister and other senior ministers sit. And Churchill, for much of his career, including in the 1930s when he was a backbencher, people left that seat for him because he was senior and distinguished. Very good show.
And the Parliament would fill whenever he was up, right? They would come and he would speak. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about these speeches because over the next few weeks, it's a lot of what Churchill said in the 30s when he doesn't count for much. He's in Parliament, but he doesn't count for much officially, but he counts for a lot in Parliament. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. The Hillsdale Dialogues underway. We are covering Winston Churchill's Second World War. Dr. Arnn, at the beginning of Chapter 3, he writes something that I was unaware of, that the campaign of 1919, which did not happen because Germany collapsed and they had a mutiny, which you mentioned in the first week of this, it had been planned. And Churchill says of it, the campaign of the year 1919 would have witnessed an immense accession to the powers of destruction. Had the Germans retained the morale to make good their retreat to the Rhine, they would have been assaulted in the summer of 1919 with forces and methods incomparably more prodigious than any yet employed. Arrangements were being made to carry simultaneously 250,000 men, together with all the requirements, continuously forward across the country in mechanical vehicles moving 10 or 15 miles each day, poison gases of incredible malignity, against which only a secret mask, which the Germans could not obtain in time, was proof, would have stifled all resistance and paralyzed all life on the hostile front subject to attack. The horrors of 1919 remain buried in the archives of the great antagonist. I did not know that. Did you learn that when you studied Churchill with Martin Gilbert?
Well, yeah, Churchill was Minister of Munitions at the end of the war. And when the German, he was good at it. He was good at most things he did. And at the end of when the Germans began in March of 1918 their offensive to the west, they captured an enormous quantity of British equipment and soldiers, including artillery and machine guns and trucks. And Churchill, when they go over the losses of the first week, Churchill said, the replacements are all ready. And, by the end of 1918, the replacements that were coming online were much better, right? And Churchill, he was building tanks. The original idea for the tank was his idea when he was back at the Navy. And they were building tanks and they were going to move, right? And no, Churchill, among his high aims in the First World War was to stop this crazy trench warfare. That's what the Dardanelles was about. And then the way he got it stopped was to get it stopped, and it would have stopped if the war had gone on for another year.
Now, I want to end this by, we're going to pick up on page 37 for those of you who are reading along with us next week in part 4. But right before that, he writes, death stands at attention, present tense. Death stands at attention, obedient, expectant, ready to serve, ready to shear away the people en masse, ready if called on to pulverize without hope of repair what is left of civilization. He awaits only the word of command. He awaits it from a frail, bewildered being, long his victim, now for one occasion only his master. And I'm reminded of Charles Krauthammer's essay, Dr. Arnn, and I only talked to him on the radio. I never met Dr. Krauthammer. That we've never been contacted by an advanced civilization anywhere in the universe because all advanced civilizations destroy themselves. Do you give yourself over to that gloomy assessment, which Churchill kind of hints at here?
No. And by the way, this paragraph is an exact quote from a paragraph that I've more or less memorized from a 1925 essay called Shall We All Commit Suicide by Churchill. And it's, very gloomy and beautiful in its direness. But no, Churchill, the lesson one learns from Churchill is you have to figure out how to stop cataclysms like this. And there's no automatic solution. He says, to quote another favorite passage of mine, along the pathways where footsteps are decisive, who knows when he may set a stone rolling or take or omit some seemingly unimportant step It is these that should be studied and pondered over, for in them is found the profound significance of human choice and the sublime responsibility of men. Churchill believed that the Second World War was much more easily preventable than the First. All the knowledge was there, the steps that needed to be taken, beginning even, he said, as late as 1935, would have stopped it from happening, because Hitler would have never got to the place where he could do all this. And so that means that this paragraph, that this paragraph is an explanation of the stakes of war, which are bigger and more terrible than ever before. But still, war is a fact, and still we can make choices. And so this paragraph is not a prediction of doom. Churchill was not given to those. It is an advance in our education. We should take all this seriously. We should figure out how to stop this happening again. And that means that the people you're criticizing, and I am too, saying, we just shouldn't have been in war. Well, surely if we can avoid it, we must. But there's no automatic solution to these problems.
What we have in this first volume is a very good map on how to avoid it again. And the way to avoid it again is to be armed and capable of deterring people. In this case, is the United States and its allies prepared to deter the People's Republic of China, and is Israel and its ally, us, basically, do we have the ability to deter Iran and Hamas and terrorist groups? And it's always the same question, I think, again and again and again. It's the Melian dialogue, again and again and again.
Yeah, and see, we need to be, war, by the way, is a product of national strength. Because, we got to face it, we live in the democratic, by democratic, I don't mean we're all free countries, we're not. But, I mean, everybody's involved now. Whole populations get involved. And second, we live in the age of technology, right? These weapons, these machines that Churchill's talking about that are so destructive, right? And so it's not, and that means that we need to attend to our national strength and the hard components of them. And that means a lot of things have to change there.
And they are changing. Yeah. The good news is that they are changing. Thank you, Dr. Arnn. I'll be right back for one more segment, America. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Arnn and I will make sure you know the website where all of these particular podcasts are included for the Second World War. But I haven't been paying attention in the segment, and I want to make sure every week you hear three things. One, Imprimis, two, the video courses, and three, the classical schools that Hillsdale is sponsoring. I got my friends so excited up in Anchorage, Alaska. They're starting one. But first, Imprimis. How many people receive Imprimis a month now, Dr. Arnn?
6.7 million, I think, is the number.
So you ought to be reading what 6.7 million people read. Go to hillsdale.edu. Sign up for it. It's free. It's a speech digest. The words of those who arrive on campus in Hillsdale and speak at great length about important subjects. Secondly, their video courses. How many of them are there, Dr. Arnn?
Over 40 now.
Wow. My favorite is the totalitarian novels, but there's always a new one. Those are all available at hillsdale.edu. And then finally, they're in the school business. And how do people find out about the schools, Dr. Arnn?
Go to hillsdale.edu and make yourself into a great person and apply. And if you're tough enough and smart enough and determined enough, come to college here. It's a big problem, but you'll prosper and grow.
Oh, I wasn't talking about the college. I only tell people about the college throughout the week. I'm talking about your K through 12 schools.
Oh. So there's close to 100. I don't know how many there are of those. And we've been working on them for 12 years, I think. And, we've built a very elaborate curriculum through fundamental knowledge and close trial and error. And it's a massive cooperative system, and it's growing and thriving.
If you are in despair about your child's school or what you're going to do, then go to hillsdale.edu and find the Hillsdale Schools Project, the Charter Schools Project. It's run by Dr. Kathleen O'Toole, and you can look it up and you can participate in it. As I said, my friends up in Alaska are starting one, and they love it. Thank you, Dr. Arnn.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.